This is the Business Storytelling Show, a top global marketing podcast listened to in more than 100 countries, live streamed on social media, and broadcast on DBTV. Christoph Trapp chats with industry leaders to help your company tell better business.
Hey, business storytellers, how's everyone doing? Christoph Trapp here, your host of the Business Storytelling Podcast, episode 712 on deck, and super excited. We're kicking off a new year on DBTV. Check them out, dbtv.tv. They're now going to be available on Apple and all these different networks. Millions and millions of households it's going to. So super exciting. Congratulations to David Brunner and his crew for making that a success. Of course, we've been on there for quite a while. Now, the one thing I want to mention, we are live on Amazon once again because we are talking about Heather Younger's new book today, The Art of Self-Leadership. And you can scan that code. But if you are watching on Amazon, everything you see around me, even this shirt, you can buy in the carousel down below on Amazon. That's kind of how that works. Super easy. But today we mostly are going to be talking about the art of self-leadership. Heather Younger, you can connect with her at her URL below there as well, or just scan the code, check out the book. But let's find out. Why did she write this book? What's self-leadership to begin with? And why is it important today? Heather, welcome back to the show.
Hello there. I'm so glad to be back.
Happy New Year. It's so nice to see you again. It's been a while. I didn't look up how many episodes, but it feels like hundreds ago. And you have a new book out. Congratulations on that, of course. But tell us, the art of self-leadership, why was that important to write today? And what's self-leadership to begin with?
Yeah. Well, so going to the definition of what self-leadership is, it really is this idea of working inwardly to be able to shine outwardly and taking a journey through resilience and, self-directedness, self-care, empowerment, and then focusing on growth, your own growth over time, continuous improvement. That's really what it is. Why I'm doing it, I'm going to be honest, this journey towards me wanting to focus more on this started in 2019. I did this TED Talk, and it was called Transforming Adversity into Opportunity. And I did it then because I was kind of sick and tired, to be honest, of hearing people out in the world kind of blaming everybody else in the world, but not taking any ownership in their journey and their results and what it was they were achieving or not. And so I just have been on this journey on stages and consulting clients and continue to hear through surveys and audiences when I'd ask, why is it that you can't be like the leader that I'm talking about, the person, the human that I'm talking about in the way that I'm describing it? And they would say things like, oh, my manager, oh, the budget, oh, these leadership team. And they just kept being very outwardly focused. I thought, you know what? We got to look past this. We got to learn to lead ourselves. Stop blaming other people. Stop waiting for permission. Stop waiting for other people to do things. We need to make sure that we're on this journey and can own it on our own. And so that's why I decided to do this. I just got sick of my own. I got sick of being sick of hearing all the things and wanted to take a little bit of ownership myself.
I mean, we hear that all the time, I mean, it's everybody else's fault. I mean, certainly that seems to be even on social media sometimes, everybody else is the problem except myself or, yourself, I guess. But how do you, there's some things you can control, right? I mean, if you're like at a company, there is things you cannot control, but there certainly are things you can control. So like, how do you figure out where that line is, where that balance is? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think oftentimes when we think of sphere of control or the things that we can influence control, I think that oftentimes we put more in other people's buckets. My invitation is to say, yes, there are things, for example, at work, if your boss says that this thing needs to get done at this period of time and it has to get done, or, you just know it has to get done. You have to go do it. Yes. How you see your role in that, how you see your desire, your ability for your relationship with your boss to set clear expectations, to say, okay, here's what I'm hearing you say, here's how I can do this, here's a time frame, and let's talk about like what this time frame is and how does it work for the other things I have on my workload. So I think it's instead of just like taking things as they come at us in life, it's saying, let's pause for a moment and let me see how this works also for me, what's going on in my life. I think we can control the pauses, the reflective times, how much we pipe up versus shut up. We can control those things more than we think.
I mean, no doubt we can certainly control some things. The other thing you talk about is personal advocacy, which is kind of interesting to me. I mean, certainly if you're not going to advocate for yourself, who else is going to do it, right? I mean, why always wait? Right? Why always wait
Yes.
for somebody else? But talk about personal advocacy. How does that show up? Like how would I do that? How am I my own personal advocate, so to speak?
Yeah, let me tell you a real story. So I had somebody who was actually my business coach, and she was sharing with me a time that her partner, he had gotten hired at a job, and he didn't quite know like how to make his manager move off the dime on something so that he could then move forward on the project. And he just kept waiting, and he was frustrated. He grew more and more kind of weary of what was happening. And she was saying to him, well, why don't you go and see if you can set up a time with his secretary to do like a 15-minute check-in to kind of ask him, to clarify what it was that he expected from you so that you can then move forward on the next thing instead of just continuing to wait around for him to decide it's important for him to reach out to you. So that personal advocacy is saying, okay, how do I empower me to speak up for myself, to use my voice to make sure that I'm getting what I need out of whatever relationship I'm talking about? So in this case, I'm talking about me and my manager, right? So it's just saying like, I need to pipe up. I need to speak up. And in that case, of course he did. He said, okay, if I can't get through to him because he's too busy, I'm going to get through to the secretary, get on his calendar, get 15 minutes, try to make sure I can find out from him, like getting expectations from him about what it is I need to do next so that I don't have to feel like I'm flailing and not succeeding in my new role.
Yeah, do you think sometimes the whole manager discussion, I hear that quite often actually. Is that just a holdover from how companies used to run, right? I mean, it's like when I worked for United Way, what happened is, right, United Way worked really well for a long time because they would go into companies and the boss would say, give to United Way. And then you gave because you were going to be there for 30 years. So you better do what the boss says. And then everything changed, right? So like now people leave jobs every 3 to 5 years, sometimes quicker, sometimes a little bit longer. And depending on what field they're in, sometimes it's almost like how come you can't get any other jobs? Do you know what I mean? Like, why have you been with this company for 15 years? Is that really the best trajectory? Maybe it is, maybe it's not. But is it just like a holdover a little bit that like it used to be that the manager owns your development a little bit more because you would be with them for decades and now maybe you're not?
I wish that we could really say that. Here's what I find is that employer-employee relationship that goes way, way back, that imbalance, the lack of power from one side to the other exists in such a huge way still. And I think you're right. There is a level of like, it's in our psyche. And we feel like we have to take the things that we are getting at work instead of necessarily questioning it. I had a team member that was with me for a few years, and she was younger. She was in that she's about 26, and she's in the book too. I mention her, but would always kind of say, "Oh, I'd say something," and she would, "No, well, I don't know if that's the right way to go." And she would always question, and she would always kind of challenge, and she'd give me reasons why, and it wasn't emotional. It was always kind of like an objective view of things. And I personally liked the fact that she spoke up, that she exhibited her own personal leadership, and because she would use her own reasoning. And not everybody likes that, but like, I was a leader who liked that kind of team member, right? And so I think there are a lot of people, maybe that older generation or those who've been around managing people for a long time, they're used to the command and control way of doing things. And it is just not the right way to do it. People want to know that they're bought in. They want to know they have a voice. They want to know that they're part of that journey, and they can actually make things happen and change direction based upon just piping up. And when we give that to them, they're a lot more likely to stay. And so I think you could see, if you had a leadership in the way I've just described it, you could see people wanting to stay around longer because they feel like there's more buy-in, like they have a voice, like they're more powerful. But in most cases, the powerlessness that exists between employer and employee is still there. It's alive and kicking.
Yeah, it still exists. I mean, it also depends on the market, right? I mean, sometimes the market is very much employer focused, or the employer has the upper hand, and sometimes it's the employee, that has the upper hand because there's way more jobs than there's people who are looking for jobs, for example. So I think it kind of fluctuates; it goes up and down. But you're correct. I mean, the companies a lot of times still have the upper hand. The culture is important to certainly build. And want people to stick around. Very, very important. Now, the one thing I was thinking about as you were talking, so I'm thinking about, I mean, first of all, in theory, most every employee is replaceable, right? Even if it's completely highly specialized, blah, 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 whatever. But how about the people that are in jobs that are really easy to replace? Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not going
Hmm.
to pick any examples, but let's say, there's a job and really with very little training, anybody could do it. So if you advocate for yourself, like, let's say for a raise or whatever, like, what if the employer is just like, whatever, I'll just hire another teenager who's going to do the same thing. You know what I mean? Like, what's how do you kind of maneuver that?
Yeah. I mean, I think in many of these cases, we do have to determine if the place we're at is the right place for us. As we think about self-leadership, it is diving deep into figuring out what it is that we value and how we add value to the workplace or to any situation. And so it is going to be incumbent upon us to dig deep and say, is that the right place for us? Is that the right team? Is that the right leader for me? That can be whether you're in a management role and you're looking at someone who's a VP as your manager or a senior VP. It applies to all of us across the board. We have to dig deep. We have to make the decisions that benefit both us and our families. And we don't have to just stay there sitting in the muck, waiting for someone again to take us like we're part of a chess piece on a board and move us how they choose to move us. If we don't like that, or if that doesn't suit our vision for ourselves, there's no reason for us to stay. I'm just saying we need to learn in that case to feel and be more empowered and understand we have more power than we think. And in the case where the person's like, you're disposable, who wants to be around that anyway? There are too many other workplaces where you can feel valued. So I would say shift yourself in that regard.
Yeah, move to those places where you feel valued, where people want to work with you, where it's a good culture. Now, self advocacy is one thing, but you also talk about self care, right? So certainly, I
Yeah.
can respond with self care. I mean, I do have an article over on christophtrapp.com about how to meditate, how to get in the flow, et cetera, et cetera. So I can control that no matter where I work, no matter what I do, no matter what situation. I mean, I can meditate, right? Like
Mhm.
turn the balance app on and go and do not disturb off. But talk about self care. How does that look for
Mhm.
people?
Yes. So as we think about self leadership, I mean, resilience is really there. We have to become resilient in order to be able to lead ourselves. And so when we talk about self care, meditation being one of them, but there's so many others. It's going to work for you. They're not. It's not necessarily a cookie cutter approach. It's you got to look at what works for you. That makes you feel centered. That I look at self care as like the ability to create an armor around us that can strengthen our outside when the world is kind of hitting us about, right? And that happens for all of us. So it could be anything from gardening, it could be reading, it could be writing, it could be research, it could be, running, it could be anything for you. Like everything is different for every person. And so I would just say dig deep on that. When you think about, here's a good exercise is if you can kind of write down the times when you felt the most at peace, when you felt the most strong, write down what was happening in those situations. Start to boil down and pinpoint what are those things that put you in that place of more centeredness where you can say, okay, I can think more clearly. Now I can advocate in a much more profound way for myself because I have strengthened myself from in and out. But do that hard work, dig deep, and then you can do it. But resilience is a huge part of this. If you aren't thick, if you haven't created a thickness of skin, the ability to bounce back when things are happening around you, and they just will. So just know it and count on it. This will be the number one thing you can do for yourself is to figure out how to build that thickness of skin.
I just find it very interesting. And I mean, there's lots of things you can do. And the one thing that I've learned how to do more is like, do not disturb, right? Just use that functionality, right? Like, so people cannot call you or text you or don't respond to emails when you're on vacation, right? Like, I mean, I did a little bit of a mix, vacation, not vacation, but nobody really emailed anyways over the 2 weeks here. And, but I got a lot of work done, but I also didn't like take any meetings, anything like that. This is really the first time I think I've talked to anybody live maybe in a while here, just because, it's been vacation mode. But is that one trick, right? Just don't respond to work stuff, find the balance, shut it down as much as you can. I get it. Some jobs, they're going to have to respond depending on what they do. But there's not very many marketing emergencies, like I don't need
Exactly.
responding at 11 at night to messages.
Yeah, I was thinking my daughter was having this issue recently where like let's just say someone, I'm not going to say who, just in case the person's watching, but someone was emailing her after hours. And she was like, I don't know, I feel the pressure to respond. Should I respond? I'm like, no, if it's after hours, they know you're not in the office, then you just let that sit there. Maybe they're just putting it there because they have to. Oftentimes people are emailing. I do this. I may email after hours. I don't even expect a response. I might say, if it is, I'd say it's urgent. Otherwise, I'm just getting it out of my noggin because I just want to get it out there. But I'm not expecting you to respond. And I usually try to set the expectations with people that by the way, I'm sending this to you. You do not need to do anything about it. I needed to get it to you. So when you're back in, you could then address it. So that would be the fair side. But I'd say if you've already given fair warning that you're not in the office, then there would be no reason to respond. And you just have to not feel the pressure to give in to the need to be the person that's like always on, right? And that's not gonna give you the thickness of skin. That's gonna continue to wear you down. There's no way you can lead yourself that way.
Yeah, you just got to find that balance, draw a line, enjoy some time of it way, and go after that self-care. How do you know what the right method of self-care is for you? I mean, so for example, if you would have told me 10 years ago that I really get into meditation, and I'm really getting into it, and I think it's great. In fact, it's so great. There's sometimes I use the Balance app has this 8-hour track of being in the flow. So when you're like, or in the creative flow or whatever, or deep thought or something. So I have that running like sometimes all day, in my head. And I'm basically, I'm not meditating, I'm getting in the flow working, but it's like that concept. If you would have told me I would do that 10 years ago, I would have been like, no, I'm a big guy. I would do that. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
maybe not quite that bad, but like, how do you figure out what's the thing for you is that you should do?
I actually think that we all know it intuitively. Like this is what I was saying, that whole digging deep of like take time now, because most of us aren't too terribly busy right in these next few days, let's say. And so take some time to write down, when were the times you felt the most centered, the most clear, the most at peace. Think about what those are. And it could be, like I said, some people, it's like when they're gardening, when their hands are in the dirt and they're smelling the flowers, smelling the plants, when they're smelling the fertilizer, whatever it is they're doing. Like, those are the things literally that sometimes calm people. I tried multiple times to do meditation. I was successful one time when it was a self-guided thing at a retreat I did, but I wasn't really able to do it. So now I have other practices I do, like, going to the gym and prayer and massages and facials and like drinking lots of water. And there's certain things I do to make sure, again, that I know I am creating that armor around me to defend myself from the things that might be attacking who I am personally, as far as my values, who I am physically, right? Who I want to be as far as my vision for myself. And so I'm able to do that. And it allows me to kind of go, okay, don't respond with like the nervous system. And don't respond from a place of fear or over responsive or reactiveness, but respond from a place of being evaluative and being internal with it. And so I think you're going to have to discover that for yourself. But if you dig deep and think about the times when you felt that most centered and calm and clear and able to make a decision and strong, I bet you'll uncover it. Like for me, for example, when I go to a beach, anything with water, or I go someplace that has like rolling hills and fog, like I am like, when I am walking with my dog and there's sunshine outside and it's very bright, and that makes me feel, and so I'm having kind of panic or any issues with anxiety. Those types of things would be the things that just center and calm me. So in my mind and in my life, I have to figure out, how do I replicate those times of the sunshine, the foggy hills, right? Whatever it was that was happening. Do I have water running somewhere else? Do I have a fountain near my house? Do I have something that gives me that sense of peace? And so, again, I'm responsible for uncovering that. No boss, no spouse, no friend is responsible for uncovering that. Only I am.
Every once in a while when I interview people for a job, some people say, what does the company do to ensure my growth? And it's kind of an interesting question, because certainly I'm always vested in any team member's development. I love, when people grow. And I don't want anybody to leave ever, but if they leave for like the next step in their career, I think it's fantastic. I'm not going to say it's the Christoph Trapp tree, like the Hayden Fry coaching tree or something, but it still makes you feel good. But on the other hand too, like they have to own it a little bit too, and how, like when people say, how do you learn? I'm like, I learn all the time. I'm learning right now, right? And we're producing a podcast. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I haven't thought about that. Now, maybe in the 2 minutes here, let's talk about fear. You talk about fear a little bit. How do you actually overcome that? And how does fear show up?
Well, it's so interesting. I think of the idea of kind of irrational fears and rational fears, or those that are kind of externally focused, and the ones that were given to us are the ones that we choose to keep. So here's one I have. In my family, I have a background where there was addiction in my home, drug addiction, and that was there, and it was there for a kind of a period of time of my formative years, and then it wasn't. But then as I grew up, I had these fears of, oh my gosh, it was a fear that was like not very rational, but kind of still founded in at least an experience. But I had this fear of taking any kind of medications. I'd be like, oh my gosh, I can't take that even for pain meds because what if I get addicted? I would always be like afraid of I'm going to be addicted to something. And so to this day, I'm always having to evaluate, why am I afraid of something? Why am I not doing this? Why am I not doing that? Is that something? Here's a question I want you to ask yourself. Is the fear that you have something that was given to you either through an experience or through some kind of belief system that somebody put in your head when you're younger? Or is it a fear that you grabbed a hold of by yourself? Because it's going to be easier once we pinpoint what the fear is and where it came from to be able to bypass it. It's hard to bypass something if you don't know where it came from, because the thing could still be triggering you throughout. But once you start to go deeper and figure out what the triggers are, now you can start to say, okay, how do I work through a therapist? Do I do some kind of thing that helps me then bypass that? And I think too, if we know that it's a rational fear and irrational fear, so we can reframe the thing that's happening to us. Reframing just means that we take something that's irrational and we replace it with something that's rational. And so in the case of, for example, that what I was just saying now with like not taking any drugs, I'm going to be addicted to every single thing that I could ever take. I know that's irrational. And so when I do it, I have to go, okay, is this going to serve me? How does this help me? Also, Heather, you know where this is coming from. And so I have to kind of center myself in the thing I know that's irrational, maybe even allow myself to feel a little anxiety, and then to go, okay, but what will this do for me? And so we have to be a lot more intentional, really super intentional and purposeful about how we move from that place of fear to a place of now like more enlightenment, and then allowing me to now move forward from it as a result.
Yeah, I think it's so hard sometimes to figure out where something came from, right? I mean, even like, oh, did that come from my childhood? Oh, I don't know, maybe, like, and then you have to figure out what happened or what didn't happen, or what the effect is. It's a very difficult road sometimes to figure those things out. So good luck everybody trying to do that, finding the right partners, right therapists, read the right books, whatnot. So Heather, it was really great to see you back on here. Very interesting. Congratulations on the new book, and continued success with that. Last minute here or so, tell us, like, who should reach out to you? Who do you work with? That kind of thing.
I'd say the main folks that I work with are organizational leaders who are looking to kind of improve their leaders' development, their leaders' behavior at work. And those are the majority of the folks that I work with. And as we look at those who I speak with or speak to on stages, it ends up being corporate partners who are looking to increase more care, looking to increase more ownership, looking to increase better listening inside their workplaces. That's who would work with me.
Fantastic. And last question, stages are back. People are meeting at conferences. We're past the Zoom conference era. Sounds like it.
I've done a few. Last year I did a few different virtual keynotes still, but yeah, live stages are definitely roaring and big now.
Fantastic. Nice to see you, and we're out.
Thanks for tuning in. Please rate and review the Business Storytelling Show on your favorite podcast platform,